Welcome again, friends, to the Bacteria Connection. This is our second presentation in this seminar, and it's entitled Bacteria Are Us. These seminars are just for information purposes, and they're not to be used for treatment in particular for individual cases, okay? Especially when we're dealing with bacteria, there's actually a nice fine-tuning that is required. So I have to always be very careful that I just don't put a straight blanket for everyone and thinking that it's going to respond to everyone in the same way. Okay? So that's us in Australia, and we do deal a lot with bacteria. Many of our patients suffer from SIBO. How many here have heard of SIBO before? Now, this is very, very interesting. How many have heard of Crohn's disease? Okay. How many here have heard of irritable bowel syndrome? Okay. Now, and not many have actually heard of SIBO, despite the fact that SIBO is in many cases the precursor of Crohn's disease. It's in many cases the precursor or the precondition of irritable bowel syndrome. So SIBO is small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. Small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. And the amount of people that we have with SIBO is quite great. Okay, quite great. Now, this presentation is entitled Bacteria Are Us. Let me just tell you something. When you are born, you have 0 bacteria in the gastrointestinal tract of a baby at the moment of birth. The baby is exposed to bacteria through the birth canal, colostrum, and breast milk. It is reported that babies born through C-section have a higher risk of suffering with allergies. Now, if you are a mother and you are suffering from urinary tract infections, that is a sign that your profile in your urinary tract, the bacteria profile, is unbalanced. Now, the vaginal bacteria profile versus the intestinal bacteria profile is different. However, there is a level of similarity between them. Normally, when one is unbalanced, it will be a repercussion in the other. Okay? So I want you to notice this. If the mother is pregnant and is suffering from bloatiness, is suffering from constipation, is suffering from even before the pregnancy, it's already showing signs of unbalanced bacteria in the gut, which will also show an imbalance equivalent in the birth canal. The baby inside the mother is being fed through the umbilical cord into his liver. So, despite the fact that he might actually have access and taste to the liquid around him, that liquid is also sterile in that environment, so the entire tract has 0 bacteria, doesn't have any bacteria whatsoever. So as the mother goes into labor, and remember, I don't know how many of you know, but the mother goes into labor because the baby sends a signaling that changes something in the composition, the hormonal composition of the mother, and the brain sends a message to the mother to go to labor. So the one that decides when to come out is not the mother, it's the baby. Okay? So if the birth canal is already altered and unbalanced, when the baby actually goes through that birth canal, and is first exposed for the first time to bacteria, it will be exposed through the nose, exposed through the mouth, exposed through the ear, etc. And it goes out and then is being held by the mother. If the mother has an altered or unbalanced profile, with what type of profile is she now inoculating the baby? Unbalanced. And that can actually lead later to a response to the mother's milk in an improper way. Because the balance that ought to be there to digest in a nice and with a nice equilibrium, the milk from the mother, that means the fat of that milk, the sugar of that milk, and the protein of that milk, and everything else, and the B complex from that milk and everything else, is not there. And then bloatiness comes on the baby, and colic comes on the baby. That is if there's imbalance already in the mother. Imagine now if that baby is coming through the C-section. Now, what type of bacteria is it going to be, that baby is going to be inoculated with? Who knows? Whatever is in there, it just gets inoculated with whatever is in there. And we have no control of it. There's no control of what he's getting inoculated with. And then beyond that, rather than actually giving the colostrum, you know why the baby likes the taste of colostrum? Because it tastes the same as the liquid that he has tasted inside the womb. It tastes the same, so he knows where to go to. Smells it. Because he can't see more than here when he's just born, but it smells very good. And the colostrum smells like the liquid that he is surrendered with. So the colostrum starts bringing more elements for bacteria in it. And the population of bacteria with food and warmth grows exponentially. Okay? Now, how many hours do you need to make a yogurt? If you have a commercial enterprise, you can make a yogurt in 4 hours. In 4 hours, you can make a yogurt, which means the following. This is the milk from here to here, that's the level of lactose. So I'm going to inoculate that milk with a bacteria to make a yogurt, and I have a commercial enterprise. So the bacteria starts eating the milk, eating the lactose, 4 hours. Refrigerate. The yogurt is done, refrigerate. Now, do you have less lactose than in the beginning? Yes. Do you still have a lot of lactose? Yes. Commercial yogurts, they are not suitable for people with lactose intolerance because they have a lot of yogurt there. Let's say that your grandma makes the yogurt like my grandma used to make the yogurt, you know. She will put it there at 6 or 8 o'clock at night, and 6 o'clock in the morning we have yogurt for breakfast. So that's 10 hours. Okay? All right. So still much better option, right? Less lactose, much better option, but still lactose left. Okay? If you do it like in the old days in Bulgaria and other places, in the old times, you leave it there for 24 hours. Loaded with probiotics. How much lactose? Nothing. So 24 hours. If you are very, very good making the yogurt in a commercial way, 4 hours. Now I want you to notice this. The mother feeds the baby. Finish the feeding, gives the baby to the father. The father grabs the baby, puts a cloth here, and starts doing like this to the baby for the baby to burp. When the baby burps 2 minutes after the feed, comes out a little bit of what? What comes out? Milk? Yogurt. It's already curled. They are the fastest yogurt machine on earth. They can make yogurt in 3 minutes. Why? Because they are loaded with bacteria. We know this, that when we are babies, at that point, we have tremendous amount of interior bacteria, tremendous amount. You cannot make a yogurt in 3 minutes anymore. The babies could. We know that as life progresses, our level of bacteria diminishes. If we are sick or we have been taking antibiotics because we have an infection or whatever, it just drops. then we recover a little bit, and then sort of it drops, and then we go through crisis and drops until we are in a nursing home and we got it down here. And then we die, and there's then a different type of bacteria. There's the outside bacteria that sort of decomposes, right? That's a different one. But the more bacteria you have, the more living you are. Have you noticed? In fact, I want you to pay attention to this. You actually are an individual because of your DNA. So your DNA, every cell in your body, 3 trillion of them, belong to you. If you drop one of your cells in a crime scene and the police grab that one, they will know it's you because there's no one else on earth with that DNA, just you. You got 3 trillion of them. Now, all of them with your DNA, all of them with your information. You actually have 10 times more bacteria than cells, which means that you actually have 30 trillion bacteria in you as an average. But did you know that bacteria has its own DNA? And it's not yours. Think about that. You are less of you than when you think. Did you get that? You are less of you than when you think you are. Because you have more DNA foreign to you inside than what is yours. The more bacteria in a friendly way and in a balanced way, the more alive we are. We call that living bacteria. The more living they are, the more living you are. If they are balanced and if they are where they're meant to be. Okay? Because infection also is caused by bacteria. Okay? So if they are where they're meant to be, in the numbers that they're meant to be, you are actually more alive. Okay? And when we're living in a society in which don't touch because you're going to contaminate yourself with bacteria, and when we're actually eating and overusing, for instance, antibiotics, and when we are living in a very stressful situation, did you ever have that butterfly feeling in the stomach? You know what that butterfly feeling is? It's actually shifting of bacteria. It's actually something happening there. It's a shifting of bacteria. And when we are continuously having that butterfly feeling because of the stress in life and so on, we're having a lot of shifting around here. Okay? So, the distribution of bacteria normally increases as you go down the intestinal canal. Okay? So, from the esophagus into the stomach, there's not much bacteria there. Then you go through the upper part of the small intestine where most of the absorption happens, then the lower part, the ileum, and then finally in the colon. So basically, you're looking at in the thousands around the stomach, in the 1,000 million in the small intestine, and 100,000 trillion in the large intestine. So it gets more bacteria as you go down. Okay? Sometimes, depending on what we actually eat, and if our diets are unbalanced, okay? If our diets are unbalanced, we tend to start feeding one type of family more than others. So we start getting a bully. Okay? We have a bully. And that bully might actually be very, very friendly if it stays in the colon, for instance. But the bully, I call it like, you know, those workmates of yours, the ones that work with you, they're very, very nice people. And all of a sudden, they receive a promotion and they become a manager. Man, when they were just at your level, they were fine. But now that they are a manager, they are nasty. Okay, same as the bullies. And the bullies, you are feeding them. Okay? So when you're feeding the bullies in a particular way, that bully starts growing more and more and more and more and actually overpopulates in larger numbers, and it starts migrating higher and higher and higher. and it goes up, up, up through the small intestine, up to right the opening of the stomach. They're waiting there for you. They normally like certain type of food. You know when you're craving chips, when you're craving sweet things, when you're craving sugar, when you're craving lots of starchy food, I say to people, it's not you. It's them. It's them. They are craving for it because they've been fed and they have gone overboard with it. And that actually shows a great imbalance. There's a lot of people like that, especially in this time of age where we go and get a burger and we have a nice bread on both sides of that burger, and then we get a Coca-Cola, and then we have the chips. We're feeding one family more than others. Are you catching what I'm saying? Okay. So we need to eat, we need to digest, we need to absorb, we need to assimilate, and we need to excrete the waste. Do you know, when we eat certain foods, especially those foods that I just mentioned, you know, lots of carbohydrates, you know, lots of breads, lots of potatoes, etc., and we feel bloated and gassy and fermented, and a lot of gas, like if you need to pass gas, I just say to people, it's not you, it's them. Because they are living organisms, and the definition of living organism is that they eat, they're born, they eat, they reproduce, and they die. But before they reproduce, they also excrete. They release the waste. And if they are in the wrong place and very far away from the evacuation center, which is your colon, they are releasing the waste where? Right up there. Only in the area, just happens to be the area that you meant to absorb nutrients, and now what are you absorbing? Their waste. Ooh, that doesn't sound right, isn't it? Now, notice this. All neurotransmitters are made in the gut. All of the neurotransmitters are made in the gut. Now, how is it going to be helpful for a boy that has learning disabilities and a bloated stomach to pay attention in class? What does the stomach has to do with the fact that he cannot pay attention in class? Well, all neurotransmitters are made in the gut. So if there is a difficulty to manufacture certain types of neurotransmitters that are in need for concentration and calmness and awareness of the surroundings and so on, that boy is going to have a problem. If you are actually have a problem with a neurotransmitter, let's say GABA, and you actually need to be calm, but you have a problem manufacturing that one, you're going to have a problem trying to relax and be aware of your surroundings because you have a problem with the manufacturing of the very neurotransmitter that is needed for that. We have more nerve endings in our gut than in our spine. Think about that. You can actually become a person that cannot move your legs, cannot move your arms, cannot even swallow. But once the food has gone through the stomach, you don't need any help. It does it automatically. All the digestion is done automatically. You cannot move anything else in your body. But the gut goes by itself. They call it the second brain. It's called the enteric system. Thinks to a degree by itself. Over 32 non-hormones are there inside and manufactured inside our digestive system, including 95% of the serotonin receptors are present in your gut. 95% of your serotonin receptors are present in your gut. What does that mean? That if you want to be happy and you have issues here, it's going to be much more difficult. And for people to say, just be positive, yeah, but I'm bloated, it's going to be very difficult for you because serotonin has 95% of the receptors, the tryptophan receptors in your gut. to be manufactured and be secreted around your body and make you feel happy. You're not feeling happy, you're feeling miserable, and you don't know why. And you're thinking that it's in here, and it might actually be in here. Okay? So, stress will produce changes in the gut flora. Do you have butterflies in your gut? The butterflies in your gut can actually signify changes in your gut flora. Stress is the silent killer. Stress is doing more against us than what we actually realized. Starting from that butterfly feeling in your gut. Changes in the gut flora will produce inflammation. Are you bloated? Inflammation will produce symptoms. Okay? So any inflammation will produce symptoms. You see the sequence? You start having changes in your flora. The changes in your flora will produce inflammation, and that inflammation will produce symptoms. And when a person is sick, it's harder to be happy. Does it have an influence in your mind? If you don't think so, just visit the pain clinic. People that are dealing with chronic pain, and see how many of them are on the verge or already taking antidepressant medication. For the pain? No, because it affects here. Wherever the pain is going to affect here. Okay? So that's the brain-gut connection. Think about this. Changes in the gut flora will produce inflammation. Inflammation will produce symptoms. Changes in the gut flora will interfere, among other things, with production of neurotransmitters. Inadequate levels of neurotransmitters will cause impair in brain function. All of a sudden, whatever happens here is going to affect me here. Okay? And vice versa. Because the stress was not a stress here. Was my perception of a stress where? Here. So from here will affect there, and from here will affect here. Okay? Back and forth, back and forth. I had a friend. She had issues with, she was a very sensitive type of lady. Always very, very worrying about the children. Always worrying about the children. You know, where would they be? What would they be doing? If they, you know, she always needed to have the children next to her. They were already grown-up men. They needed to call her continuously. They needed to be around her. And one of the children decided to go to America to live. Oh man, from Australia. Oh, you know what she started suffering? A lot of gastrointestinal issues. Tremendous gastrointestinal issues. Why? Because the boy was leaving to America. Okay? Now, patients with anxiety and depression have consecutively gastrointestinal disorders. 84% state of anxiety is related to SIBO. SIBO, what was SIBO? I already explained it to you. Small intestinal bacteria overgrowth that nobody has heard of, and the majority of people that suffer greater issues in the gut might be suffering of SIBO. I've got a lot of people that come to me and said, I just suffer from Candida. I said, oh, really? I've got Candida. I said, really? Congratulations, me too. How many here have Candida? Everybody. Everybody has Candida. Candida is a yeast and is naturally found in the human intestine. It's present there. Now, what happens is that in some cases, Candida, you can have a Candida overgrowth, and it goes out of control. But when people come and say, I just got Candida, I say, oh, congratulations, me too. If it is where it's meant to be, it's doing for us a favor. If it's in the numbers that are over the limits and in places where it doesn't meant to be, then it's creating a problem. So I said, so who diagnosed you with Candida? I checked it on Google. I said, all right. That makes sense. You know, and I said, have you checked, you sure it was Candida and not cancer? I said, you reckon it's cancer? I said, I don't know. Because for sure it's not going to be Crohn's, isn't it? I don't know, because I checked Crohn's, do you know? You reckon it's Crohn's? I said, I don't know, what is Google saying? we have to be careful. Candida is getting a lot of publicity out there, and is not actually is demerit publicity. It's not doing as much as we think Candida is doing. Okay, there's actually something else that we will start developing. Even in these seminars, I'll just tell you a few things about it. Okay, and look, you're welcome to use Google. I use Google. I use Google. I had a patient once. She came with a very, very rare condition, extremely rare condition, and I just went through reception. This is when I was in Melbourne. I went through reception, I got the file. She actually spent 5 minutes writing an entire case for me. And I got the file and I said, I'll be with you in 5 minutes. So I got inside and I opened the file and I had no idea what that condition was about. I never heard of it. It was definitely not in my pathology book. I had no idea what it was. So what did I do? I just went to Google. I went to Google and look, when I do my papers and when I submitted work, I don't use Wikipedia. I don't use that. But in that moment, in 2 minutes, she's going to walk through the door. So I just went to Wikipedia. What on earth is this thing? And I found out what it was very rapidly, So she sat there and she goes and said, I've got this and this. And I'll sign the condition because she might be watching and then everybody knows who she is because it's a very rare condition and people know her back in Australia. I've got such and such. Do you know what it is? I said, sure. It's affecting this and this affecting this and it's doing this and it has this genetic component and things like that. I said, really? You know what it is? I said, yep. I know now what it is. I said, good. You're going to become my practitioner. And I said, how is that? I said, because I went through 3 doctors and they had no idea what it was. You know what it is. You can help me. We embarked with that lady for about a 2 years journey, trying to actually work out different things, and she was great. This lady could actually do a PhD thesis on her condition. It's rare, but she has actually put the work. And she sends me medical articles and journals just to read in her condition. She's great and she's doing fantastic. Now, if you have her condition and you come to see me, I've got material for you for the next 2 years already, or what things might work and what things definitely don't work. Okay? So Google is good. Wikipedia can be good. But just be careful because if you just tick all the boxes, you might end up with cancer and you'd even know it. Just Google told you that. Okay? So, interesting enough, 67% trace of anxiety related to IBS. What is IBS? Irritable bowel syndrome. Now, think about that figure there, please. 67%. So, a person walks into my office and says, I've got IBS. Did Google tell you that? No, my doctor told me that. Okay, good. So, I just go through the case and I just tell them, all right, I'm just giving you 3 cases. You tell me if you fit into number 1 case, number 2 case, or number 3 case. Case number 1, option number 1, you're normally constipated. And out of the blue, out of no reason, you seem to be on the other end. Very soft, very diarrhea type. Option number 2, you're normally diarrhea type, very soft, but for no apparent reason, the out of norm condition will be you feel constipated for 1 day or 2 days and then back to diarrhea. That's option number 2. Option number 3 is you here 1 day, you here for the next 2 days, then you are in the toilet three or 4 times in an hour, just very, very loose, and it goes back and forth, back and forth. And then she says, she's wondering which one of them is IBS. Now, which one of them is IBS? I'll ask you. Which one of the 3? All of them. Well done. All of them are IBS. All of them. Okay? So, once we figured out through an interview through an interview section of the consultation that she does have IBS and she does show symptoms of IBS, we want to make sure that it is IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and is anything higher. Because if it is higher, the bloating should actually if it is IBS, the bloating should actually be a bit lower. But if that person feels bloated 15 minutes after eating, that food hasn't arrived to the colon, it's already up here and it's already bloated. Okay, so there's something else. We figured out, let's say that person does have IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and he wants to fix it with diet. If I put her in a protocol, I remove all the triggers from diet that are related to IBS. I take all the triggers out. Number one trigger for IBS, wheat. Okay? So make sure you get hold of the gluten connection, all right? Number one trigger for IBS is wheat. Number two trigger for IBS is lactose. Now, we spoke about that yogurt before in the previous lecture. There's a yogurt that doesn't have any lactose, so that cannot actually be a trigger because it has not lactose. So lactose, we're talking about cheese, we're talking about commercial yogurt, we're talking about cow's milk, etc. That type of lactose. And there's a number of triggers. Oh, should I say it? Did I dare to say it? Chocolate is a trigger for IBS. Sorry. Now, let's say she is a very, very good patient and she removed all the triggers there. Okay, so I've got a whole list of triggers and she removes all the triggers. And she does very, very, very well with the diet. How much recovery the diet alone can actually achieve? Look at the percentage of how much of that is related to anxiety. 67% is related to anxiety. So how much can I accomplish? How much can she accomplish with diet alone? 33%. 33%. It's still not turning over, isn't it? 33%. Why? Because the other 67% is anxiety. It's actually anxiety. 27% of people suffering with IBS, they also suffer with depression and celiac disease. Okay. The absence of probiotic bacteria in the gut can have adverse effects not only locally in the gut, but has also been shown to affect central HPA and non-aminergic activity, features that have been implicated in the etiology of depression. Now, I've got all the references there, which are actually medical journals that actually have done proper studies on this. All right? So, for instance, in IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, it might affect up to 20% of the population. 70 to 90% of patients with IBS have some type of mood or anxiety disorder. 19% of IBS patients suffer with schizophrenia. 29% with major depression, 46% with panic disorder. Now, we are talking about mental disorders and we are connecting it with what? With the gut. And this is actually based on studies. That's the reference there, psychiatric, for a psychiatric journal there. Autism. We know that children with autism suffer with gastrointestinal distress in a number of percentages, with diarrhea or constipation or gas or reflux. So they have behavioral and learning issues, but at the same time they have what? Gut issues. Celiac disease might also be associated with an autoimmune endocrinologic disorder such as thyroiditis. In addition, a variety of neuropsychiatric conditions such as depression, anxiety, peripheral neuropathy, ataxia, epilepsy, with or without central calcifications, and migraine headaches have been reported in individuals with celiac disease. Now, how many here have heard of leaky gut? Okay, leaky gut is the urban way. Do not come to somebody that has done a little bit more studies than Google and tell them leaky gut. Don't go to your doctor and say, I've been checking in Google and I've got leaky gut. Leaky gut is not found in any pathology book. It does not exist. We don't call it that way. We call it intestinal hyperpermeability. That's what it is. And I believe that is what it ought to be called also, because leaky gut gives different connotations. I actually had people that thought that leaky gut is a person that cannot contain himself and is continuously with diarrhea because he's leaking. That's what he thought. But that's not leaky gut. Leaky gut or intestinal hyperpermeability is that there are certain proteins and certain type of bacteria and certain type of yeast that actually goes through, when we see here on the right, it goes through the lining, the gut lining in your absorption mechanism around your small intestine. So, for instance, proteins ought not to come through that lining. The body needs amino acids. We consume protein, but that protein needs to be broken down into small portions of 1 or 2 amino acids, not full proteins. When you have leaky gut or hyperpermeability of your intestinal lining, you actually have entire formed proteins or long peptides that are traveling inside your body. You have intruders coming in. They ought not to come in. And the body responds in an autoimmune response to it. Okay? Autoimmune response. That's when, for instance, Candida can do a little bit of a damage, because Candida is actually very big. Should not go through that lining unless that lining looks like one of the building walls in a country that has been hit by war, and you have a lot of holes on that wall. Okay? Then Candida might actually go through and travel through in other places and create damage there. But in most situations, should not go through. In the majority of instances with intestinal issues, there is intestinal hyperpermeability in the majority of issues. Okay? So what happens? Then you start having response to many foods. Many foods are actually upsetting you because they're not your friend anymore. They are becoming your enemy. And food ought not to be your enemy. Food ought to be your friend. But if it's entering in the wrong places and in the wrong forms, it's becoming your enemy. You following? Okay, so selected symptoms of leaky gut: confusion, poor memory, fuzzy thinking, mood swings, aggressive behavior, nervousness, anxiety, fatigue, gas, bloating, skin issues, food sensitivity, indigestion, IBS, constipation, diarrhea, asthma, fibromyalgia, migraine. There you go. Those are the same as SIBO, some of the Crohn's conditions, ulcerative colitis, some of the people that might have depression as a major. There are symptoms even for people that have Helicobacter pylori infection. What am I saying? They are for leaky gut, yes, but for many others too. That's not what Google tells you. Google doesn't have that capability to tell you. Okay? Bacteria and digestion. So what is the bacteria then doing for us? Okay? Remember, they are our friends if they are friendly bacteria, and they are against us if they are not that friendly. Okay? So what are they doing for us? Digestion starts in the mouth with your teeth and saliva. Other enzymes, stomach and pancreatic juices, and bile from part of the digestive processes. However, now we know that bacteria has a very crucial role in digestion, absorption, and assimilation of nutrients. In other words, what I was saying previously, if you are taking vitamin B complex and you don't have the right type of bacteria to assimilate it, you are actually taking it from here and it will go through the other end, and you just pay $33 a month for that supplement, and it's not helping you. Okay? Bacteria breaks down complex fats into simple fats, complex sugars into simple sugars, and proteins into amino acids. So enzymes do that. Sure, enzymes do it, but so is bacteria. And there's people that show bacteria an imbalance of bacteria here, and then they eat a little bit, they eat, for instance, avocado, and they feel bloated. With avocado, there's no gluten in avocado, is there? No, but they feel bloated because it's fat. Or they take coconut oil and they feel bloated. Or they eat butter and they feel bloated. But there is also an imbalance of bacteria. Are you following? Okay. So, good bacteria keep the bowel clean, break down food, help make B and K vitamins, suppresses bad bacteria. Now, why vitamin K? What do hospitals now inject the babies with as they are born? Vitamin K. Why? Because there's actually issues with vitamin K deficiency in babies, which is very risky because they can bleed to death. Because vitamin K is what helps the coagulation of the blood. And why would babies have issues with creating vitamin K? Because the bacteria of many babies nowadays is unbalanced. Because many are born by cesarean section. Because many are born or inoculated with the wrong type of bacteria from the birth canal from the mother. Because many, they don't actually get colostrum. They just get the formula straight away. Because many, even if they get colostrum, they just get the formula, and the bacteria is all upside down, and the vitamin K production is not adequate, and the absorption of it is not proper. So how are we going to fix that problem? We'll just give vitamin K injections for that. Now, am I pro giving vitamin K, or am I pro natural? Make sure it's natural, and if you do it in the way it's been designed to do, you won't need it. For sure, you won't need it. But we don't live in La La Land. There is actually many out there that have no idea of what we're talking about here. They have a pregnancy and they never pay attention to that type of bacteria. There are circumstances in which C-section is necessary for the health of the baby, for the health of the mother. So we have to always make sure that we understand the context in which things are done. Okay? Our 3 babies were not given vitamin K. But we understood many of these concepts already. Okay? So, the bacteria damage gut walls, infection, putrefaction, inflammation, flatulence, bad breath, stop absorption of nutrients. So they are actually a bother. They're there to just make your life impossible. Every time that those fellas pass gas, because they do, because they excrete out, they pass toxins. Those toxins are like bombs against your wall, your lining wall. They just boom, throwing grenades there, boom, 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 every time. Then those toxins all around there are being reabsorbed by you. Oh, I've got a headache, I wonder why. And if you don't feed them, it's even worse. Because if you don't feed them, they start dying. And you end up with dead bodies. And you know what dead bodies do? They rot out. They release more toxins. So you feel even worse. So you better get that bread, you better get that sugar fix, you better get that biscuit, you better get that potato. You better get it. Why? Because they're giving you a headache now that they're dying. We call that the die-off effect. They dying off. Some people actually, in experiences like that, they end up with diarrhea. You know why? Because all of those are dying of starvation. They release a toxin, irritates your bowel, and you go out. And you need to go to the toilet because of that. The body's trying to get rid of that toxin in the fastest way. That's what actually happens with antibiotic-induced diarrhea. Have you heard of that? Antibiotic-induced diarrhea? That's what happens. The antibiotic medication kills the bacteria also in your gut. Lots of dead bodies, lots of toxins. Then the body reacts and causes a diarrhea to evacuate those toxins. The body is so clever, isn't it? Okay. So, among other functions, the appendix is a reservoir of good bacteria. Do you all have an appendix? Is anybody that doesn't have an appendix? Raise your hand. Everybody has an appendix, but there's one hand up. Which one? Mine. I do not have an appendix. Oh, man. Oh, better be careful. Because the appendix is actually a reservoir of bacteria. So how does that work? Well, you have an antibiotic medication given to you because you have an infection, because you have a toothache, because whatever, and is needed. Okay? And I'll tell you what, I believe in natural products. I never had a toothache in my life. My father is heading towards the 7th decade of his life, and he has all his teeth, not one single decay. My youngest brother is going to turn 39, and he doesn't have any tooth decay. And we were bragging between us both. I was eating a lentil stew. Somebody forgot a little stone in that lentil stew, and I cracked a molar, and I just cracked it. I didn't do any damage, it just cracked. Bacteria got in it. And as it got in it, the radiating pain was from here to here. Is like, don't come near me because I bark and bite. And then I understood what a toothache was. Whoa, because there's a book called the Book of Proverbs that says, talking about a woman a wife that is not nice to the husband and compares her as a toothache. And I'm thinking, oh man, she is a very, very bad woman, because that pain was amazing. I used everything. People said, try this natural, and I used it. Try the clove, I used it. Try the parsley, I used it. Try the oregano, I used it. I used it all because I'll try that first any day. Okay? And then I went to the dentist, and he showed me the x-ray, and there was perfect teeth there. There's nothing wrong. It was just like a hair-like crack around the molar and a huge infection around here. Okay? So, what did I do? Antibiotics, got rid of the infection, got rid of the tooth. Okay? So, there is a time and a season and a purpose. Okay? And I'm a wimp. I cannot endure pain. I just said, I'm very easy prey. If there's ever a persecution happening in this world, I've got it easy. They just need to show to me the knife, and I'll pass out just by the sight of it. No problem. Now, the appendix is a reservoir. When you have antibiotics, the antibiotic is not going only to the bacteria, it's going to any bacteria. And you actually have a lot of bacteria dying in your gut. So a little sample of it is stored in your appendix. By the way, the appendix is also involved in your immune system. Okay, the baby generates some of the white cells from the appendix originally. Appendix means you're good for nothing, but it's good for many, many things. Okay, lubricates the chyme, which is the waste that comes up against gravity. It's an insecticide for parasites in that area of the cecum. So this is great. And at the same time, it holds a sample of your bacteria. When the antibiotic has actually been stopped because the function of it has finished, you have no more infection, then it secretes that sample back into your colon and then repopulates. Then whatever you eat, it will determine which family is going to grow more. So because you have been such a good boy taking all the medicine, I'm going to give you now an ice cream and a lollipop. Oh, now I'm feeding a family which are the carbohydrate scavengers more than others. and you've been sick, so you're going to sit here, you're going to watch a movie, and we're going to give you popcorn and a cola. Now you got nothing. You got a good opportunity now to see how to rebalance this. The appendix goes and secretes your sample, but you're just feeding one type. So then you create an unbalanced. Can you see that? All right. So the word eubiosis is the state of microbial balance within the gastrointestinal tract. So the gut flora balance is achieved when gram-positive lactobacilli and bifidobacteria predominate. They present a barrier against invading organisms. Bacteria attacks bacteria. They thrive for food. If you have the good guys here in good numbers and the bad guys come in, the bad guys cannot actually survive without food. If you have enough of the good guys here, the good guys here are going to eat the food, the environment that the bad guys need, and the bad guys are going to die out of starvation. If you don't have a good level of bacteria here, the bad guys are going to settle in and they're going to rampant around. So the opposite is called dysbiosis. It's the state of microbial imbalance within the gastrointestinal tract. Around 85% of the intestinal microflora should be formed of good bacteria and 15% of bad bacteria. So 85% good bacteria, 15% of bad bacteria. But notice, the greater the imbalance, the greater the signs and symptoms of disease. So there are actually people that literally have the opposite. They have 85% of bad bacteria, 15% of good bacteria. Do you think they are going to have symptoms? Absolutely. They're going to have issues absorbing, they're going to have toxicity, they're going to have headaches, they're going to have joint pains, they're going to have a lot of things because of the amount of toxicity that is created here and the lack of nutrition being absorbed. The average individual eliminates 2 trillion mixed probiotics per day. 2 trillion mixed probiotics per day. Probiotics and prebiotics foods are the sensible approach to help with the balance of the intestinal ecosystem. So in order to maintain the ecosystem, we need to make sure that the little babies there are well looked after. Remember what we said in the beginning of this presentation. You are less of you than when you think you are. There are more of them than you inside. You need to make sure that you look after them, okay? So I'm looking forward to present for you the next and final presentation of the bacteria connection. Looking forward to see you there.